The movie begins in a peaceful neighborhood. Suddenly, a young girl is seen running frantically. She crosses the road repeatedly, glancing back as though she's trying to escape from someone. When she finally reaches home, her father comes out to check on her, but she rushes past him, gets into her car, and drives off. She drives for hours, still looking back as if someone is chasing her. Eventually, she arrives at a beach and makes a call to her family, telling them that she loves them and not to worry. After the call, she sits on the beach, waiting. The next morning, her lifeless body is discovered on the same beach, her leg grotesquely twisted, evidence of a violent act. The scene shifts to another suburb, where a young girl named Jay is swimming in a backyard pool. Her friends are inside watching a movie, but Jay seems distracted, focused on getting ready for a date that evening. Later, she meets her date, Hugh, at the cinema. As they wait for the movie to start, Hugh notices a strange woman in a yellow dress standing at the entrance. He quickly asks Jay if she can see the woman, but Jay says no. Hugh starts to feel uneasy and asks if they can leave. When Jay questions him, he makes an excuse, claiming he's not feeling well. After their date, Jay excitedly talks with her friends about Hugh, expressing her interest in starting a relationship with him. They go out again that night, dining at a restaurant. While they're chatting, a strange figure slowly approaches them. Later, they share a romantic moment in Hugh's car at a secluded spot. Suddenly, Hugh attacks Jay from behind, knocking her out with chloroform. When she regains consciousness, she finds herself tied to a wheelchair in an empty parking lot. Hugh apologizes, explaining that he's cursed by a mysterious entity that has been following him ever since he had an intimate encounter with a girl who passed the curse on to him. He tells Jay that the only way to transfer the curse is through intimate contact and warns her that the entity can take on any form, making it impossible to distinguish it from a real person. Jay, understandably terrified and skeptical, begins to scream for help. However, Hugh forces Jay to the edge of the building and shows her the entity. Suddenly, Jay sees a strange, completely naked woman slowly walking toward her. Hugh tells Jay that she must sleep with someone else to transfer the curse. Otherwise, if the entity catches up with her, it will kill her. Afterward, Hugh drives her back to her friend's house and drops her off, fleeing the scene before anyone can catch him. Jay's friends quickly come to her aid, calling the police. Jay is questioned about what happened, but the investigation leads nowhere as Hugh had been using a false identity. The next day, while in class, Jay notices an old woman in the distance, dressed only in a nightgown and looking indecent. To Jay's shock, no one else in the class seems to notice her, making Jay realize that this woman is the entity. Startled, she grabs her bag and leaves immediately. In the corridor, she encounters the same woman again, which terrifies her. Jay runs away from the school and heads to a store where her friends Kelly and Paul work. As expected, her friends don't believe her story, but Paul, who has a crush on Jay, offers to accompany her to her house that night. Seeing Jay's fear, everyone agrees to stay by her side to help her feel safe. That night, Jay struggles to sleep, having become paranoid. She sneaks downstairs and finds Paul watching a movie. He tries to comfort her, telling her that everything will be all right, but Jay remains unconvinced. Just then, they hear the sound of the kitchen window shattering. Paul goes to investigate but sees nothing. Frightened, he rushes upstairs to wake the others. Meanwhile, Jay is left alone downstairs and decides to check the kitchen herself. To her horror, she encounters a scarred woman limping toward her in a creepy manner. Jay panics and runs upstairs to her friend's room, slamming the door behind her. Her friends try to calm her down, but Jay is clearly traumatized. She finally confesses that she is cursed, though her friends still don't believe her. After some time, one of them cautiously opens the door, revealing an empty corridor. Initially relieved, Jay thinks it might have been just a hallucination. However, a terrifyingly tall man suddenly emerges from behind her friend, sending Jay into a panic. She screams and escapes through the bedroom window, making her way to the balcony. In the next scene, Jay rides her bicycle to a local park, and her friends catch up with her, trying to calm her down. Seeing Jay's growing paranoia, the group decides to track down Hugh to get some answers. After some investigation, they find his address, but the place is abandoned. Unwilling to give up, they search for old photos and other clues, eventually discovering that Hugh's real name is Jeff, and that he attended a nearby high school. They finally locate Jeff's real address and confront him. Jeff immediately apologizes and explains that the same thing happened to him after a one-night stand. He confirms that the curse is real, and the only way to escape it is by passing it on to someone else. Hearing this, Jay and her friends are stunned and decide to maintain as much distance as possible from the entity. The group then brainstorms potential safe locations, and one of them suggests a friend's lakeside cottage. Jay likes the idea, and they all agree to go there. As time passes, they momentarily forget about their troubles and enjoy their time at the lakeside house. However, their peace is shattered when a strange woman approaches Jay from behind. It's the entity of death. The woman grabs Jay's hair, shocking everyone. Paul tries to save Jay, but since he can't see the entity, he is powerless to help. When he attempts to swing a chair at random, the entity throws him off. In a desperate attempt to protect herself, Jay and the group run into a nearby shed. Jay grabs a gun and shoots at the entity, but the bullets do little damage. Terrified, she quickly closes and locks the shed door, trying to keep the entity out. Surprisingly, the entity begins banging on the door, creating a hole at the bottom. Jay cautiously waits, seeing nothing at first, but as she approaches the hole, she is startled by the sight of a little boy with strange markings on his face. This indicates that the entity has changed its form to fit through the hole. Luckily, Jay manages to escape from the shed, jumps into her car, and drives away at top speed. However, in her panic, she loses control and crashes into a cornfield. In the next scene, Jay wakes up in the hospital, surrounded by her friends. She has sustained minor injuries and learns that she will need to stay in the hospital for a few days. This news sends Jay into a panic, as she fears the entity will trap her in the hospital. Her friends try to calm her down, promising to stay by her side. It is at this moment that Jay realizes she might be able to end the curse by passing it on to someone else through intimate contact. Fortunately, Greg, who still doesn't believe in the curse, agrees to help her and hopes it will make her feel better. That night, they share an intimate moment in the hospital bed. A few days later, while keeping an eye on Greg's house, Jay notices someone breaking in through the front window. Shocked that she can still see the entity, she quickly calls Greg to warn him, but no one answers. Fearing the worst, she rushes to his house. Inside, Jay finds the entity disguised as Greg's mother, knocking on Greg's bedroom door. She desperately tries to warn him, but Greg opens the door, only to meet a gruesome fate. Horrified, Jay flees the house and drives away, knowing that the entity is now tracking her again. Terrified and traumatized by what she has just witnessed, Jay heads to a beach as far away as possible. There, she spots some boys and, in her desperation, attempts to seduce them to pass on the curse. However, she changes her mind at the last moment and decides to go home. The next day, Paul offers to help Jay, confessing that he has feelings for her and is willing to take on the curse if it means keeping her safe. But this time, Jay refuses his offer, instead devising a plan to eliminate the entity once and for all. Later, the remaining friends drive to a nearby swimming pool and break in. They bring various electrical appliances, intending to electrocute the water to destroy the entity. Jay acts as bait, waiting in the pool for the entity to arrive. After some time, she sees it enter, but instead of approaching her, it begins throwing the appliances into the pool, causing their plan to go awry. The entity seems to anticipate their strategy. Jay, now frightened, dives underwater to hide, while her friends try to help but can't locate the entity. Paul then takes out a gun and, with Jay's guidance, tries to shoot the entity, but accidentally hits one of their friends in the leg. Another friend manages to cover the entity with a blanket, allowing Paul to get a clear shot. The entity falls into the pool, and for a moment, they believe they've succeeded. Jay swims out, but the pool begins to fill with red liquid, signaling that the entity isn't truly gone. Their plan has failed once again. Realizing that the entity cannot be killed, Jay decides to sleep with Paul, transferring the curse to him. In the end, Paul starts searching for someone else to pass the curse on to. He spots two women and approaches them, contemplating his next move. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you in the next video.